Hi folks, welcome to Bear Mountain. Well, this week we got a couple of things going on. The first thing is we just got our mums from King's Mums. They arrived last night at 7 o'clock by UPS, and I want to show you what we're going to be planting with these guys, and just the quality of the work that these guys do at King's Mums is great. They really look good. They came through just with flying colors, and got to get those guys potted up. But the main thing I want to work on this week is I've been trying to find a way to make or how to use a homemade herbicide. Now, herbicides, you can say, oh, that sounds bad. But actually, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to get weed control on my driveway. So I have a gravel driveway, and what I'm looking for is something that I can apply that will knock things down, that I don't want to use something like Roundup or some other kind of, harsh chemical. And I'm looking at my driveway, and what's surrounding it is not, really sensitive of vegetation. But so what I'm trying to do is to use just kind of a standard DIY, do it yourself, herbicide that probably many people have heard of before. It's vinegar and some salt and some soap. But basically what I'm trying to get to is not so much figuring out whether that would work, because I know that'll work. The vinegar, breaks down the waxy outer covering of the epidermis of the leaf. The salt acts as a desiccant, and all you need to do is apply sunshine and a moderate amount of heat, and pretty much that'll take care of smaller weeds and grasses that are in the vegetative growth stage. Now, they're not going to do anything like go after long tap roots or take into account some kind of perennial grasses that have more vast root systems. But what it will take care of are these smaller annual grasses that pop up in a driveway in springtime and kind of become an annoyance that you either have to, flame off, or you have to, find some other way of basically doing it. A lot of people just give up and they just go to Roundup. And I can understand why too, because Roundup, has its advantages. The biggest disadvantage, my personal feeling on it is I think it's toxic. It's in everything already. I don't need to add more of it to the environment. This is just my own personal opinion. I've used it before for years when I first moved to the place. And what I noticed was the more I used it, the more it seemed to sterilize things to the point where surrounding life wasn't as vibrant. I used it on a lot of places on the farm to control, edging and wheat, or not wheat. What I'm trying to say here is that there's a type of grass that is it's almost hay-like in a sense, and it's kind of like a cereal grain. I think it's like wild oats. I get a lot of that around the place. It makes great mulch, but it does tend to grow very vigorous in the spring. So what I've been trying to do is I've been trying to get it to the point where I can maybe use this herbicide to knock things down at a lower growth stage. And then if I need to, come back and just kind of tidy it up with maybe a quick propane over, burn off the top. And I know it's not 100%. I mean, I know like when you apply Roundup, there's a good chance, you're going to get everything. You're going to get any kind of perennial grasses and things like that. It's going to nail the roots. It's going to nail the entire plant. It's going to be gone. In this case, this is a contact herbicide, meaning if the spray don't hit it, it don't burn it. So you got to make sure that you have a surfactant in it, that'll allow the vinegar and the salt to spread over the entire plant as you spray it. And I tried using my soap that I made with the Jadam solution, the Jadam wetting agent. And I think it just didn't work out right because I'm using straight vinegar, and the material didn't spread and stick the way I needed it to. So I moved to using Dawn, which is kind of a degreaser type of dish soap. And that seems to work pretty well. Everybody kind of recommends that, and I can see why, because it does tend to take things and, you know, spread it out in a film over the plant as you spray it. So then it becomes more effective. So let me show you how I'm mixing this stuff up, and we'll talk a bit about cost too. You know, is it cheaper to use an herbicide like Roundup, or is it cheaper to do the vinegar soap solution, or is it comparable? I think it kind of depends on how many times you have to apply your vinegar soap solution is going to be kind of the key to it. And there's some other factors too that I think, you know, as we walk up and take a look at the area that I'm talking about, that you'll begin to understand. So let's start with the first thing was, before we get into the soap, let me just show you the mums, and then we'll talk about the soap. Okay, we got these guys. They came in the mail, and you can see they're really healthy. They've got quite a bit of roots. This variety here that I'm looking at is okay, Lava. Okay, Lava is kind of a spider, and I just wanted to show you guys. This is the type of roots that we're talking about. The root systems on these guys are in pretty good shape. They were raised in kind of a mini plug. What we're going to do here today is we're going to pot these guys up into the same thing we did over here. These were our cuttings we took last week, and you can kind of see they're a little wilty, but I think they're going to be okay. The center of the plants look pretty good, but we're going to use these same type pots, these 4-inch pots, and get these guys kind of up to snuff. So that's going to be my job today. I've got 40 of these guys in here, and they're all kind of, you know, in really good shape. And they've been wetted down, so these guys can wait for an hour or two while I take care of my other little project, which is putting some herbicide on the driveway. All right, so here are my ingredients. Now, I know some people say, oh, you take the vinegar and you dilute it 50%, and then you add the salt or the Dawn, or maybe you just use vinegar diluted at 50%, and then you know, put the Dawn in it, and that'll do it. But actually what I found is that if you dilute, this is already 5% acidity, so it's already fairly low acidity. If you add a higher vinegar, like there are some agricultural vinegars that you can buy that are 20, 40%, and diluting those down, you know, 50%, if you take a 20%, dilute it down to 50% water, you're going to be at a 10%, which is still twice as much as this. So I can understand, you know, from the standpoint of, you know, if you're starting already at a high acidity level, that diluting it down would make some sense. But this case, this is already a pretty fairly weak vinegar. This is your cheapest vinegar you can get, you know, some of it anyway. Might be able to get it cheaper at Costco, but I got this at Walmart for $3.82. That's for a gallon. And then I've got the Dawn, which the whole bottle is like $3.59, but I'm using like a tablespoon at a time. So we're talking about pennies. I'm going to give it at most 10 cents every time I put in a tablespoon of that. And then we have cheap iodized salt, also great value from Walmart. This was 84 cents for the entire thing. Okay, so you might ask, okay, so what's the math on this work out to be? So when you look at it, I know from my previous experience to get about a gallon of this material. And if I'm spraying it on the driveway on low vegetation, meaning stuff that's, you know, less than an inch tall, I can cover roughly 200 square feet of my gravel in 1 gallon, which is pretty good. That gives a pretty good coverage. It kind of coats everything. And so when I'm looking at this, I'm saying, okay, this is the cheapest vinegar you can get that I found anyway. It was at Walmart's white distilled vinegar, $3.82. It was $3.60 for the Dawn and about 84 cents for the salt. That's the entire container. So when I look at this and say, well, how much do I use? Okay, so I'm going to use the full gallon of the vinegar. I'm going to use about a tablespoon out of this Dawn. Okay, so on the Dawn, there's 650 milliliters in this particular bottle. If I look at a tablespoon of being 15 milliliters, I'm going to give roughly, I think it's somewhere, I'm just guesstimating roughly around 44 tablespoons out of this entire thing. I'm using 1 tablespoon. So I can mix up 44 gallons of spray on this one bottle, which isn't too bad. Working that out in terms of cost, we're talking about 8 cents a tablespoon, give or take. I'm going to round up and just say 10 cents. It's easier doing it that way. The salt, as we talked about, it's 84 cents for the entire thing. I'm getting roughly about, I believe, 3 cups out of this. So I'm just going to say, well, it's easier to, I mean, I know it's less than 30 cents, but I'm just going to give it 30 cents. So if I say 30 cents and 10 cents, that's 40 cents. And 40 cents on top of this makes $4.22 per gallon. And if I'm doing 200 square feet, what we're talking about is about 2.1 cents per square foot. Now, I've seen different calculations, and it depends, again, how you decide to mix this stuff up. And depending on what you're spraying it on is how far you're going to get coverage for it. But that's just kind of my basics of what I'm looking at. This is roughly about 2.1 cents per square foot of low vegetation sprayed on a driveway. Now, if I go back and I looked at some prices like at Home Depot of Roundup, I mean, Roundup you can get all kinds of different ways. If you buy large containers of it, it gets cheaper. You buy the smaller containers, obviously more expensive. I mean, if you buy ready mix, it's even more expensive than that. So I guess, I had to kind of pick a midpoint. And what I picked out was if you bought a gallon, or not a gallon, but you bought 64 ounces of Roundup, and you were able to, figure that out, it roughly works out to somewhere about 4 cents per square foot of spray, kind of the same way that I'm doing it. That was on Amazon, or not Amazon, but Home Depot pricing. Now, again, depending on where you get your Roundup and how much you buy, you could probably cut that cost down quite a bit. Maybe it even gets close and comparable to the 2.1 cents here. But remember also, too, that, an herbicide like Roundup or others are designed to be more specific. They maybe have better surfactants in it than using just Dawn. And they may also have other chemical components that make them systemic, meaning they get into the actual weed itself, like glyphosate does, gets into the plant and actually disrupts the plant and kills the plant in its entirety. This is a contact. This is basically, we are chemically burning these guys off, or actually we're letting the sun do the burning. These are just prepping the plant to be desiccated. That's all we're getting out of this. So how to mix? Well, I'll pour a little bit of this gallon, about maybe a quarter of it, into my sprayer. Then I'll mix the salt into here, and I'll just keep shaking until the salt is dissolved. Add the salt into the sprayer, put a tablespoon of the salt vinegar solution into the sprayer, add a tablespoon of the Dawn, and kind of shake it up real good, and then you're ready to go. That's all there is to it. All right, so we're just pouring in the last of the vinegar salt solution into the sprayer. And I just want to make certain that I don't have any salt residue in the bottom. Looking in there, make sure it's all mixed up. Actually dissolves pretty well into the vinegar solution. I don't see really any remaining salt at the bottom of my container, so I'm in pretty good shape. Okay, so last step is we just put the top on, and then we're ready to go. And we have a mixture of herbicide. And you can kind of see it's got a little bit of a blue tint. So when you kind of look at it, it's got that Dawn look to it, which I guess is kind of interesting. So let's go out and we'll take a look at what we've already applied the last couple of days, and then show you what we're putting on today. All right, so what you can see here, besides my shadow, is you can see the area that has not been sprayed, which is right in front of us, still green. And these areas over here were sprayed 2 days ago. Now our weather has been rather mild. As you can see, we're sunny today. We've been sunny actually the last several days. Today is going to be about 75 degrees. And so what we're going to see here is probably this stuff will continue to die off. Now, what I want to point out here on this side, if you look at the material here, you'll notice that These are grasses. Some of them, because this is a contact spray, I didn't get super close to the paver stones, and I probably should have. So one of the things you can see right here is this is a thistle, and it has definitely been burned off at the top. I have no illusions that the root is still very much alive. There's an alive thistle right over there. And so what this is telling me is, if you can see some of the grasses, the tips are burned, but when you actually go down and look at it, you go, well, okay, so the material didn't get all the way down into, you know, the base of the plant. So spraying stuff that's tall does a job on burning it back, but it doesn't necessarily do a job of killing it. Now the flip side is true over here in the central part of the driveway, and you can kind of see that the individual grasses are burned back, and they're dead. There still are some spots where, you know, there are still pieces of green. So the question is really, were the roots killed off? And I don't think so. Here's an example of plantain. It definitely was severely burned back, and in, you know, most of the cases, I think what we're going to be looking at is it really did damage to it, and I think you know, it may come back, but again, you know, most of the stuff, the growth has definitely stopped. All right, so what we're going to do here is we're just going to be spraying these weeds right here that are very close to these pfitzers. So I want to be very low and make certain that I'm covering everything that I can. In the shade, what I've noticed with this stuff is it takes longer for it to be effective. And what I did do is I did run the lawnmower over, take off the high stuff that I could. And it's just a matter of, you know, getting these guys sprayed down. It's probably going to take a couple of days. We've got at least 2 days of dry weather ahead of us, and so it should work out pretty good. So if you look down the driveway again, you know, just take another look at it, you can kind of see the results. This is after 2 days after application, and it's done a pretty fair job. Now, again, what are the keys to it that take away from this on it is you have to, I think, for the best results, have whatever you're trying to spray down and burn off down to as low a possible level as you can get. You know, usually I'd say you're trying to look for something that's maybe about an inch in height or less. Clearly, you know, I showed you what happened to when we sprayed taller stuff, the results are kind of spotty. And even though there still seems to be some burn off happening at this point, we haven't had any rain now for, well, pretty much for the last week. So the plants, even so, you know, in the driveway, it's a pretty harsh environment. Sun hits it, it gets pretty hot, and it really helps kill it off. I think in general, if you are spraying in a very shaded area that doesn't get any sun at all, it's going to need to be drier for a longer period of time, and it's going to take longer for the actual herbicide to do its work. So key takeaways to try to make this cost effective is vegetation that is not near something that you're going to worry is being overspray, or perhaps any kind of leaching of the salt later on. The salt remaining in the driveway would probably act a little bit as a pre-emergent type thing, but eventually it'll leach out. I'm thinking, in general speaking, it isn't really a strong odor. You know, sometimes people say when you spray vinegar, I suppose if I had a stronger concentration, it'd be a heavier odor to it, but there really isn't the odor to it at all. You can kind of get, you know, if you get your nose down close to it, a slight whiff of vinegar to it, but not really that much at all. And I guess overall, I'm kind of pleased with it at this point. I'm going to see, you know, how we're going to get some rain here in this next few days. We're going to see, you know, what bounces back. I'm assuming that some of those perennial weeds will resprout and they'll be back to the races again. Although the younger ones, I probably hit them pretty good and took them out. So we'll see how it goes. So that's my experiment with making my own herbicide at home. I'm kind of surprised at how well it did burn back. I was kind of, from stories I'd read on the internet, this kind of mixture is like hardly effective at all. And I think, again, it comes down to where are you using it, and time of day you apply it, and how many dry days with at least decently warm weather with bright sun you can get that'll help kill the things off faster. So anyway, I got a little more spraying to do out here on the driveway, so I want to thank you guys for watching, and as always, stay safe out there, and we'll catch you on the next video. Bye-bye.